Hello, I'm Leah Ravensbergen. On behalf of my colleagues, Juliette Fournier and Ahmed El-Ganaidi, I'd like to thank you all for the 2022 Best Practice Ready paper and for the opportunity to very quickly go over the key results of our paper here today. So our paper was on mobility of care. Mobility of care is a relatively new concept. It was coined in 2013, and it encompasses all household serving travel. So all the travel required to perform care work, such as grocery shopping or dropping off and picking up children. We performed an exploratory analysis in Montreal, Canada, using the 2018 Origin Destination Survey to look at who completes mobility of care and how this type of travel is completed. What we found in a nutshell is that mobility of care is a really significant portion of daily mobility. In fact, 28% of daily trips comprise mobility of care. In terms of who does mobility of care, we found a gender gap in this type of mobility where women complete a much larger proportion of mobility of care than men. What's interesting though is when we did a more intersectional analysis and considered gender alongside income, we found that that gender gap in mobility of care is at its most narrow amongst higher income households. It still exists, but it's not as big as we find in households that earn $60,000 a year or less, where women complete 60% of mobility of care. In terms of how care trips are made, we find that compared to work trips, they're more frequently made by car and by active transportation, and far less frequently made by public transport. So taken together, very briefly, we argue that mobility of care should be explicitly considered in transportation planning because mobility of care is significant. This is about a third of daily mobility. And also because it has important equity considerations. Women, and in particular low-income women, complete the bulk of this type of mobility. Finally, because we find that care trips are more frequently made by car and far less frequently made by public transport, we believe it's particularly important for public transit agencies to explicitly take into account mobility of care to ensure that when we promote sustainable travel, we promote it in an equitable way as well. With that, I'd like to thank you for this for listening to this very brief summary of our paper. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email myself or my co-authors. And our paper is currently under review in TRR, so hopefully you can read that soon. Thank you.